Have you ever visited a church and you recognize something is wrong, something is off? Then you start to visit that church over and over again. And the more you visit, you realize that something is not right. Some things are not right. But you cannot really put your hands to it as far as you're concerned. The singing is great, the preaching is great, but yet something is missing, something is not right. What can it be? And then you realize sometimes it affects church growth. You wonder what is going on, what this something seems to be stagnant. But what about you as a church member? You're consistently going to your church and you realize year after year things are not improving. Well, you have great leaders, you have a great pastor, you have wonderful people, committed, dedicated people. The church is like a family and it never go from being this stage of a family. And you want to know what's going on, what is the problem. Now, welcome to Central Truth with Pastor Dixon, and we will dive into some of these issues as we look at church structure and leadership. Now, churches do not understand these principles that we are going through today as we deal with church structure and leadership. Sad to say, most churches are not properly organized. I'm not talking about that they have these certain traditions and rituals they do from week to week. Go to church Sunday morning, have the same routine, and then have midweek Bible study and women's fellowship, men's fellowship, youth group, the whole drill. I am not talking about that and they're doing all these things. I'm talking about something more deeper, something more structure to talk about. We will look at these as we look at church structure and leadership. Now, the first thing that I want us to look at, we're going to look at some objectives that I want to talk about at this time. I want us to look at some of the objectives that we are going to be considering in this series. First, church structure and leadership. What are the objectives that we want to cover? So here are the objectives. We have the overview of structure, importance and purpose of a purpose statement, the importance of a mission statement, the importance of a vision statement, the importance of a value statement. But for this podcast, part one, we're just going to look at overview of structure. Overview of structure. So, when we talk about structure, what we're talking about structure. When we talk about a structure is a construction name. The word structure, when you're building an edifice, you're building a structure, you're building a building, and there are certain things that you have in place that you're going to have a foundation. You're going to have, them certain level of strength. The material that there must be shape. There must be dimension, shape, order. All these things. Strength, durability, all these things that needs to be put in place in order for us to have a structure, be able to protect us from the elements. Also, it be able to protect us from people who are not needed, who are not wanted, and people who are in the structure can be protected. So we're looking at structure. These are the things we're talking about, structure. But when we're talking about organizational structure, there are certain core principles, core documents that needs to be in place in order for the church to function. The church will have order, stability, strength, protection, durability. These are some things that are crucial that will help the church, particular in these times. So the first things that we want to look at when we look at overview of church structure, some of the things that we want to look at are these. The first thing we want to look at, the importance of incorporation, and incorporation speak to legal protection of your church. Bylaws, constitution, doctrinal statements, church operational manual. So these are some of the things that we are going to look at. Now it is sad to say when you ask many pastors or church members, your church incorporated? We don't need to be incorporated. We don't want the government to be in our business. So I tell them plain and simple, when you're not incorporated, the government have more rights to your church than when you're incorporated. When you're incorporated, you don't know who the church belongs to. Something happen legally, the government has to make the decision. But when you're incorporated, the church becomes its own self-governing body or organization or institution. No one person could inherit it. No one person could own it. It is a self-governing entity, just like a business. Therefore, because of that, it offers you legal protection. Simply put, when you're incorporated, there's some legal documents that the church must have. It must have, but in the articles of incorporation, it must have bylaws. It must have a constitution. And these bylaws and constitution protect the church legally. The bylaws and the constitution tells how the church, especially the bylaws, how the church function. How the church operate, like how to select pastors, how to conduct meeting, what is the expectation of members when members are not acting according to biblical principles and have to deal with church discipline, how the church is supposed to deal with that. All these things in the bylaws and the constitution. If the church has to be dissolved, remember, no one person could inherit a non-profitable organization or incorporation. It has to be another non-profit organization. We got to know things about tertiary laws and all these kind of things. Very important that church understand all these things, bylaws and all these things, how the church operate, how the church conduct itself. So being incorporated protect the church to have its own self-government without the government itself, the secular government, have to encroach to deal with problems in the church. I know churches split, and because they had pastor, they can't get rid of the pastor. When they start the church, everything was in the pastor name, land, property, everything. Because they didn't have no constitution, no bylaws, it wasn't incorporated. The church can't do nothing about it. It belongs to the man. Things like that. So you see the importance of these articles and these documents and the constitution, how you function, how you govern. So these are very important. The church is its own entity and not owned by a person or a particular group within the church. You see, every church, as much as your pastors and everything like that, it must have what you call, when you're incorporated, you must have what you call a board of governance, governing board, or They must along, and this governing board could comprise of the pastor, the elders, and deacons. So no one man call the shots. And the spiritual leaders is important to put that. A lot of churches don't put spiritual people. They have trustees over property, but they're not spiritual leaders. There's nothing to say that you must have trustees when you're incorporated, but there's nothing to say that the trustees cannot be spiritual men. You cannot say they cannot be deacons. But at the same time, these trustees are accountable to the congregation. They just cannot do something willy-nilly. The congregation have the final say, and the trustees represents the congregation. So you see, the pastor is the spiritual head. He gives spiritual guidance and everything like that. But at the same time, he is accountable to the board, and the board is accountable to the congregation. So with that, we have what you call accountability. Accountability must be in place. So because of that, it's very important. You just can't say it and assume it's so. And a lot of church function like that. In reality, no structure really exists. But when you have these things written down and ratified legally, the church has legal protection for self-government and self-governance. There is a book I want to recommend when it comes to incorporation. And this book, The Business of the Church, by Stephen D. Lentz. Very important. I read this book and I highly recommend it. And the thing about it, it's not very big. It's not I think it's about 70 something pages, but did a wonderful job. He's a pastor, but he was also an attorney. So he understands the legal ramifications that involve in church organization, bylaws, and everything like that. But I highly recommend this book. If you're a pastor, you're on the elder board, and this is a book I highly recommend, and it gave some good insight that when I read it, I said, never thought of these things before. Really, really important. So I recommend this book. But now, as we transition back into the church constitution, also, this is a book I recommend especially for church organization bylaws, how to write up the bylaws. Especially this one more deal with church meetings, how to handle church meetings. Oh man, you talk about if you want when in the church you can see hell show it says it's during business meeting time. So bylaws and constitutions are very important, especially the bylaws. The bylaws help the church, give the church a process in dealing and handle matters of the church, especially when problem arises. Because you have bylaws and constitution, these things are written for you how to handle them, who is responsible to dealing with certain issues, how spiritual guidelines, how to conduct these deal with these issues, how to conduct business meeting when selecting workers and leaders and pastors in the church, how to go about doing this, give you legal frameworks, to give you process by which the church should govern. And remember, no one is above the constitution of the church. When we say the Bible, But the thing about the Constitution, it should be laced in Scripture and with the Bible. And the thing about it, the government, the law of the land is not so concerned about what you put in the Constitution. Is a matter of once they come before you, you have guiding principles that govern your church, and clear guiding principles that govern the church and how the church functions. And if there are things that there are times that Constitution and bylaws needs to be amended, but no one person could get up and amend the bylaws and amend the Constitution and change that. That's a legal document. As a matter of fact, constitutions and bylaws, when you have articles of incorporation, as a matter of fact, some churches, the first thing they need to be is to be constituted. And after you're constituted, then you could be incorporated. But you should be constituted. And when you're constituted, the constitution of the church is filed in the government archive. It is there. And you cannot just go, it's a legal document, you just cannot go and change things. They must have a quorum, they must have a vote. And when these amendments are made, the original must be there, followed by the amendment, the section or the portion of the bylaws or the Constitution that is amended, and that copy the amended Constitution should also be filed within the government. So it's a legal document to protect the church, and no one could just come willy-nilly and just change things like that. So it offers protection of the church. So it's very, very important that churches have these things. I see a lot of churches get in trouble because they don't have bylaws, they don't have constitution. As a matter of fact, let me say this. I'm a pastor, I love pastors, but facts are facts, reality are reality. When people become pastors in churches and they realize that the Constitution is inhibit them and prohibit them, they want to go and change the Constitution, the bylaws to fit them. Sometimes it's justified, don't get me wrong, but there's a way to do it. It must go before the church and the church must vote on it. Now, if the church does not want to change it and they have a vote and majority, it does not reach the quorum. As a matter of fact, it's supposed to be a quorum of vote, and with that quorum, how much percent of the vote have to be made in order for an amendment to be carried? And some pastors, because they don't have the quorum and the votes to change, they go and try to maneuver and manipulate. And many members of the church say, well, he is the pastor. No. The Constitution, church Constitution is the governing articles of the church. And let me say again, it must be laced in Scripture. And as church, sometime if you don't know, get somebody who know how to do these things. I'm available. I help churches more than once. Write the church constitution, amend their constitution, also help them in incorporation. So feel free to call, and I can come and help and we can discuss. So if you're interested in that, just give me a call, reach out, and we will talk. I'd be happy to help churches in this form, because so many churches in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis are in the Caribbean, not constituted, not incorporated. And that's dangerous. Very, very dangerous. So now, with that said, now we see bylaws, constitution. The next thing that we want to look at when we look at bylaws and constitution, the next things that we recognize about bylaws and constitution before we go on We see rules that help to reduce conflict in the church, rules that help create order and structure in the church. No member is above the Constitution. The Constitution should reflect the Bible and give respect to parliamentary procedures. As I said, this book here, The Church Business Meeting by R. Dale Merrill, I highly recommend this book. Very, very small, but it helps how to the church to conduct themselves, especially in meetings using parliamentary procedures. And the parliamentary procedures which this church follow is Robert's Rules of Order. What is Robert's Rules of Order? You know, we hear about parliamentary procedures. What are the parliamentary procedures that we follow? I remember I spoke to a lawyer. They said, well, we follow parliamentary. But where we get these parliamentary procedures from? Well, I don't know about the British. What is the book that they use, or the manual? But Robert's Rules of Order is the primary parliamentary procedures that is used in the US, in the parliament and everything. Most churches, most organizations, most business use Robert's Rules of Order. And this use Robert's Rules of Order as it pertains to churches. And it's very important. I mean, the same parliamentary procedures that we use here is the same thing in the Robert's Rules of Order. To be honest with you, you see, Mazda is Robert's Rules of Order, what I see in most democratic society use. Well, if someone have the British one, let me know. But what I see, most parliamentary procedures that I see in most of the Western society, our democratic society, is Robert's Rules of Order. So, if there is another one, I will be glad to you can share. But it helps us to understand parliamentary procedures, how the church should conduct itself with church meetings and all of that. Who should conduct the meeting? Who should chair the meeting? You know, who should have the floor when time to speak? Setting the agenda, following the agenda. All these things are in this little manual, the Church Business Meeting. I recommend church, get it. And there are other books out there in church administration. There are books out there on how to have constitutions and bylaws and everything. There are a lot of books out there on the market on that. Now, with that said, now we move now into the next area that I want us to look at as we look at church structure, doctrinal statement. Oh boy, this is so important. Doctrinal statement. You know, it's so important. I don't know, many churches do not have a doctrinal statement. And you hear the idea, we don't write down our doctrinal statement. You just know it. Generation to come will forget. Oh, all we need is the Bible, but they tend to forget. God is God. God could whisper in our ear and tell us what to do, but He gives us a whole Bible. 66 books, laced with His doctrines. And we mean to say, with all these denominations and belief, we mean to say that you as a church cannot write down your doctrinal statement to say what you believe, that anybody who comes to this church is supposed to be able to take up a thing and say, these are our doctrines, these are our core beliefs. That's why churches go astray. No doctrinal statement. But the importance of the doctrinal statement are these. Very, very, very important. Doctrinal statements are very important. And it behooves me why churches do not have doctrinal statement to this very day. And it's also high and pious. We don't need to write down anything. That's why generation to come, they don't know the doctrines and the churches then go helter skelter. Now, the importance, have your doctrinal statement written. Every member who come to the church must have the doctrinal statement. The doctrinal statement is a compilation of core, uncompromising theological beliefs that the church adheres to, teach, preach, and practice. If you don't have a doctrinal statement, what are you going to preach? What are you going to teach? What are you going to practice? Have it written down. If written documents are not important, why God wrote an entire Bible? Written documents last. Written records are important. They outlast us. So when a church have a written document, written bylaws, generation to come, it stays and they can look at the doctrinal statement. Every member of a church should have the doctrinal statement of the church, because when they have it, they can go through it and with scripture and go through the doctrinal statement. Very important. So it's a compilation of uncompromising theological belief. What is the core belief of your church? The core belief, the core doctrines that you should not be compromising. The doctrine that you live, preach, and teach. How could you preach without doctrine, with your doctrinal beliefs and your doctrinal statement? How could you teach? What are you going to practice? That's why churches are so shallow today. The doctrinal statement also determines the church values. The principles and guidelines, the values of the church is based on the doctrinal statement. Your doctrine, as it is said, you have orthodoxy. That's your doctrine, orthodoxy. You know what is orthodoxy, right? The orthodoxy are your core doctrine, and you have orthopraxy. Practice your doctrine. Orthodox belief, uncompromising traditional belief, core belief. So if you cannot have orthopraxy without orthodoxy, you cannot have practice without doctrine. What are you going to practice if you don't have doctrine? And everything else. So the basis on how to deal with spiritual, social, political issues from a theological perspective. How we deal with situations. Your doctrines don't determine how we deal with certain situation, not certain all situation in life. How we look at life from a theological point of view. When the world is looking at from a secular point of view, we look as a church, we look at it from a theological point of view. How we deal with problems with each other. How we deal with marriage. How we look at marriage. How we look at the ailments in society. How we deal with people with problems. How we deal with political situations. How we deal with social situations. How we conduct ourselves with all these things that's going on in society. How do we look at them? How we deal with them? The doctrines. Not only that, your doctrinal statement, it is the fundamental statement of all, it is the foundational statement of all other documents, whether legal, constitutional, your mission, your vision, your values, all of these stems from the doctrinal statement. It is the foundation for all other statements, all other written articles and bylaws and whatever other statement that the church, they should be laced in what? Doctrine. The church is not just another organization, it's not a club. The church is the bride of Christ. The church is what right now God leave on earth to represent him. It is the bride of Christ. The world will look at things from a secular vantage point. We look at life from a spiritual vantage point. The world look at life here and now. We look at the kingdom of God to come. The world look at earthly kingdom and earthly political leaders. We look at a reigning everlasting king, the kingdom of God. That is our political campaign. We are campaigning for Christ, who is going to be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So, Lord, sometimes I wonder how some Christians get so involved in politics. They have more passion for the political arena than for the gospel of Jesus Christ. No wonder they don't understand spiritual things. As it is said in the book of Revelation, I think it's Revelation 14:11 or 11:14, one out of those two chapters. The kingdoms, the political leaders, the nations, the kingdoms of this world will come to his Christ. Every knee shall bow, all the kings and leaders shall bow to Jesus. That's why we should be looking at life through the lens of theology, the doctrine. All your articles, all your statements should be laced in doctrine. So with that said, no one in the pastor should be above the Constitution. He don't governs the Constitution. The Constitution governs him. He governs by the Constitution and every member in the church. With that, we have order, we have structure, and it eliminates a lot of problems. But sad to say, you know what? This is what happened. When a person becomes the pastor, all of a sudden they become the bylaws, they forget the Constitution, they throw it behind the back. It's not valid anymore, and we church members are so gullible that we don't himself look at our bylaws, our Constitution, to see how things govern and how things go right. That's why we have so many problems in our churches today. And I say it with passion because it irks me, it aches me when I see this. Remember, the Bible said the Lord is not the author of our confusion. And when we look at the Bible, when these letters were written to the churches, remember Paul, the apostles wrote these letters to the churches, how churches should conduct and behave themselves. So that's why churches should have constitution and bylaws. Because at the end of the day, I don't care. There is no one that is without sin. And remember this, to us as pastors, remember this. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. There's three things that will destroy a man over time: fame, fortune, and power. These things are very intoxicating. And if there are not accountable procedures in place, fame, fortune, and power gets to people's head. It is a drug. That's why we should have all these things in place. And the members of the churches who think they can live how they want, do what they want, and the church cannot do anything to them. That's why you have bylaws and constitution. And not only that, every member of the church should have a copy of the bylaws and the constitution. And also, it tells how to deal with church discipline. Procedures, you have all these things in place. And every member, when they become a part of the church should have what you call a legal statement. You become a member of this church, first of all, you should have a class. Take all in your members to the bylaws, the constitution, the doctrines of the church, and after they have this statement, a signed affidavit agreement that we agree and adhere to the doctrines and belief of this church. With that, if anything happens, the church is covered legally. We don't do all these things. Very, 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 very important that we have this. And I say it with passion and I say it with pride, because I look at a lot of churches. When you look at that, one man run everything. And not only that, there's a group and a clique within these churches that runs and governs the church. That should never be. Yes, they are pastors, they're given authority to guide and lead spiritually. Yes, the church should have the parameters, the guidelines, and everything like that. And they should have certain leverage. But at the same time, they should have accountability. Because I don't care who you are, the greatest of men, if you look at the Bible, the great men, the great leaders fail and falter at point because we are sinners, and without accountability we are going to be in trouble. And we look at, Saul, David, Solomon, and all the kings that you go through, all the leaders. God always have somebody there to hold them accountable. The law, and when they despise the Lord raise up a prophet to confront them. So we need these articles of incorporation, bylaws, and most importantly, doctrinal statement. Very, very important. The next thing, as we look at the doctrinal statement, lastly, we're going to be looking at what we call here the church operational manual. Brother Dixon, what is church? All this? Yes, very important. Even before you talk about vision, mission, and all these things, these are very important. Now, this one could stay a little last, but I'll show you the importance of it. It could come after it can come after the church ratify its mission, its vision, value statements, and so on. But this is very important though, and I think it's very important. I'm going to show you why. Now, the reason why this is so crucial and vital, this one, the church operation manual delegating responsibility. This is a detailed manual of the operation of the church. Detail, what is a detail? From you open the church door, who is responsible for opening the church? Who is responsible for cleaning? Not the name of the person, the office. How that person is selected or elected or appointed. What are the qualifications? What are the criteria? For every position in the church, you should have these things. Even to the point that you should have in the very structure of the church, the building, how it lays out. You should even have things like a disaster preparedness plan. In case something happens while people are in the church, what are the evacuation plans? What are the procedures? Things like that. The organization structure of the church, you should have an organization chart showing lines of authority and responsibility. Stating different departments and who is leading and who, the different, these things supposed to be in that. Delegating responsibility, as I said before, this always make me chuckle when I get, oh, we need workers. Fine, we need workers. We need a youth leader. We need a women's ministry director. We need a men's ministry leader, director, chairman, whatever. Oh, we need somebody to be a trustee or whatever. We need a Sunday school superintendent, but yet do not have a job description for the position. When the person come, okay, volunteer. Okay, I volunteer to do the job. What is my expectation? You should have a job description handed to the person right now. By having a job description, the church know exactly what they're looking for, what they want. And not only that, have a criteria of vetting and selecting these persons to fill that position. Now, in some churches, not here in the US or bigger country, you have what you call a professional staff and you have volunteer staff. Professional staff are people who are being paid. Like in the States, people, the pastor is going to be paid. He's called professional staff. Sometimes you have, if a church have a youth leader, because some people go off to university, seminaries, and they have youth pastor degree and different things like that. So they expected after the study they should have some kind of stipend that they're paid because of their qualification and their skills. The church might be going into media ministry. These things cost money. People are qualified and trained. They need to get some kind of stipend off of that. But here in the Caribbean, we cannot afford, a lot of times we cannot afford that. So majority of our workers are volunteer in the church. But nevertheless, volunteer or professional staff, you must have job description, you must have procedures in vetting and hiring or placing people in position. The same Jim Collins, good to great, great by choice. I think it was great by choice. Well, in good to great, he said he's wanting to have a boss and a leader know how to get the people on the bus and place them in the street, in the correct in a seat. But in great by choice, he said a leader not only put them in the seat, but he know how to put the right person in the correct seat. So it's not a matter of getting people on the bus. It's a matter of placing people in the right seat in the bus. Job description. And in churches, giftedness is a lot of times It's not much. The thing about church is a lot of times it's spiritual giftedness. Sometimes a person natural gift bleeds over into spiritual gift. Sometimes it happens that way. Sometimes it just happens. I mean, when you look at Paul, yes, Paul was a brilliant man. He was a Hebrew of Hebrew. He was from the tribe of Benjamin, not touching the law. You know what I mean? He sat at the feet of Gamaliel. You know, he was one of the most brilliant men at the time. That's why he wrote the most books of the New Testament. God uses, and that's why he was able to debate and to convince people, because the man was a legal man. He was a man of the law, a Pharisee of Pharisee. He was one of the most brilliant men at the time doing his so he know how to defend. He know how to defend the Bible, present the Bible, and so on. So God used that natural talent they have and it bleed over into spiritual gift. The same thing with Moses. People don't realize that according to when Stephen said concerning Moses, he was taught in all the ways of the Egyptian. As a matter of fact, it is believed he was supposed to be the next in line to be the Pharaoh. He was a brilliant man in writing the Bible. Stephen talked how brilliant Moses was. He was trained in Pharaoh's palace. So as a matter of fact, because of that, God used him to write the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah, the law. God used him to be the leader. God selected him and God sent him in. We look at all these things because of maybe accident. You know, God was behind it. God knew that Pharaoh is going to be, Moses is going to be the one who deliver the children of Israel. So he had to send him up in Pharaoh's palace to learn administration. Moses was one of the apart from Jesus Christ in the Bible, Moses is the most revered person apart from Jesus Christ. Not only that, God know how to teach him humility, how to deal with people. So God sent him in the backside of the desert to tend sheep so that he can be humble. And learning to tend sheep taught him how to lead God's people. So we see all these things when we come to operational manual, job description, vetting process. Not a matter of just say, well, I'm available and put this person. Next thing, that is not the spiritual gift of the person. When the person fail out, cop out, we blame the person. That's our fault, not the person's fault. That's our fault. And this is what happening in churches all the time, and they're not learning. But when they go to a job now, they got to make sure, oh, I have your resume well written up, and you got to know how to deliver yourself, and you look for the most qualified and competent person. But so in churches, we're supposed to look at the most qualified and spiritually gifted and competent person. Also, your value statement. It's one thing to select a person because of their competency. But as a church, everything must lace in value and character. One, if somebody going to be the treasurer of the church, yes, they should have some kind of background in finance, accounting, bookkeeping, something like that. But most importantly, they must also have good character, good values, and moral standing, because Hey, they might have the qualification, but if they're crooked, you know what happens? They're gonna be like made off gone with the money. If someone is going to be a youth leader, that the person got to be have not only doctrinally sound, qualified in dealing with young people, but morally sound. You don't want pedophiles and people molesting with young children and all this. Character is very important. So you have to have a matrix of all these things. People who adhere to the vision and the mission of the church. All these things should be in the operational manual. Procedures in selecting, hiring, dismissing people in church position. So we have these things, as I mentioned before: outline, selection, creation processes in selecting professional and volunteer position of the church. So you have to have these. If you're going to hire person and staff, you need your procedures. If you're going to have volunteers, you need your procedures. These things must be in place. Somebody come to church, they want to know the church, they're supposed to get an operational manual. All of them in one book. So if the church need say a praise team leader, you have the criteria, the expectation, blah 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 right there. How are we going to, what are we looking for? Bam 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 bam, you have it right there. That's how these things must be in place. And then we're going to see how the purpose statement, the mission statement, vision statement, value statement tie into all these. But these are some things we're going to do in the next part 2 in church structure and leadership. Part 2 we're going to do purpose statement, mission statement, vision statement, value statement. So stay tuned for that. And remember, if the content on this YouTube channel or on this channel, whether YouTube, Facebook, even X, formerly Twitter, Rumble, LinkedIn, so there are many places, and I am developing an Instagram account. Wherever, please like, subscribe, share, and tell a friend. And remember, if you as a church thinking about incorporation or need somebody to help with your church constitution and bylaws, you can give a call. I will put my information right there at the end. And also, I'm involved in a survey, a church leadership survey, as we analyze churches. I'm going to put the link, and I would like you to participate. And this, you don't know what can come out of it. It can be very insightful to help churches. So church, until next time, may the Lord's blessings be with you.